Today we'll be discussing 5 things you can do to protect your assets before you get sued. Things happen. No one expects to get sued, but when the unexpected happens, you'll wish you were prepared. You get in a car accident. Your poodle, Mr. Schnookums, bites some brat in the park. You end up having a situation where your old oak tree collapses onto your neighbor's roof, causing thousands of dollars of damages. In those situations, you'll wish that you had done something to protect your assets before you got sued. If your opponent obtains a judgment against you, he or she can probably pursue that judgment and go after your personal assets. That may include your wages, real estate holdings, bank accounts, vehicles, boats, personal items, jewelry, anything of that nature in order to satisfy the judgment. Once you get sued, or depending on the state, even once you've just been threatened with a lawsuit, things get a lot more complicated. That's because many states, about 43 or so, have laws modeled after the Uniform Fraudulent Transfer Act, also known as the UFTA, that allow courts to declare certain conveyances, certain transfers of money and property to either be fraudulent or otherwise invalid if done after you have notice of a lawsuit or a potential lawsuit. For that reason, you should start your asset protection plan right away, as in now. Be mindful that the laws pertaining to personal liability and judgment collection and all that differ among states and jurisdictions. Every state's different, so you really want to make sure you consult with an attorney licensed in your jurisdiction. The information I'll be discussing here is general information, so you shouldn't rely on anything I'm saying in making your decisions. Definitely want to consult with an attorney and do everything you can to protect your assets. Number one thing you need to do, make sure you have adequate insurance. For most people, the 2 most important insurance policies are automobile liability insurance and homeowner's insurance, also known as renter's insurance if you don't own a home. For each policy, make sure that you thoroughly understand what your policy limits are and understand what the policy covers and does not cover and which exclusions to coverage apply. We'll get into that in a few minutes. Let's start with auto liability insurance. Automobile liability insurance covers you in the event that you negligently cause someone else injuries, death, or other damages like property damage, loss of wages, etc. And it's mandatory in pretty much every state, I would think every state, to drive with liability insurance if you're going to drive. Every insurance policy has policy limits, and this is important. A lot of people don't know and understand this. These are limits on the amount that the insurance company will pay for a specific loss. For example, let's say that Daphne Driver has the following policy limits: $50,000 for bodily injury and $10,000 for property damage. While texting and driving, Daphne smashes into Mario Motorcycler, shattering half the bones in his body. Mario's medical bills come out to $70,000 and his $13,000 motorcycle is destroyed. The most the insurance company will pay is $50,000 for Mario's bodily injuries out of a total of $70,000 and $10,000 for his property damage out of a total of $13,000. This means that Daphne may be liable to Mario for the $23,000 difference, $20,000 for the excess bodily injury claims, and $3,000 for the property damage. Daphne would have been much better off getting a policy with higher limits. However, she would have paid more in premiums, meaning monthly payments. So insurance really always is a trade-off. Higher premiums mean less risk, and vice versa. It's up to you to evaluate your needs and your appetite for risk and to select the policy that's best for you. But just remember, it's not always an easy decision, and sometimes it's better to be overinsured than underinsured. In fact, often it's the case that it's better to be overinsured than underinsured. In addition to verifying that you have adequate policy limits, you also want to make sure that you read and understand the exclusions in your policy. Exclusions are provisions in a policy that eliminate insurance coverage for certain losses. What this means is that the insurance company, if an exclusion indeed applies, will not pay under those circumstances. Every policy has its own exclusions, but I'm going to go over 2 really important exclusions that apply in pretty much every automobile policy, and that's excluded drivers and business use. Let's start with excluded drivers. I'm often shocked to see how many people don't know until after an accident occurs that their own children are excluded under the policy. That's not true for every policy, but in many cases it's true. So you want to read your policy and contact your insurance agent if necessary to determine if anyone is excluded under your policy. If someone is excluded under your policy, you should never let them drive your car, not even for a short drive to move it across the street, not even to pick up a few tacos. Never. No taco is worth personal liability. The second exclusion is the business use exclusion. If you use your car for work, say you're a pizza deliverer or a dog groomer, you transport people in a ride-share program like Uber or Lyft or something else, you want to make sure your automobile policy does not exclude business use. And if it does, you want to purchase an additional rider in the policy to allow that. If you do have an exclusion for business use and you get in an accident, there's a very high probability that the insurance company will refuse to pay you. Now we'll discuss homeowners insurance. Beyond covering the structure and contents of your home, homeowners insurance or renter's insurance, if that's what you have, has the added benefit of providing you with additional liability coverage for a wide array of potential claims, some of them having nothing even to do with the ownership or rental of your home. I'll give you a few examples of these claims. Number 1, your tree falls and causes damage to your neighbor's roof. Number 2, your dog bites someone. Number 3, someone slips and falls on your icy porch. Number 4, your kid's baseball shatters your neighbor's window. And number 5, your washing machine floods and destroys the neighbor's priceless Persian rug. As with any other insurance policy, you want to make sure you understand each of the exclusions in your policy, what's not covered, and what the policy limits are for every area of coverage. I know it takes time to read this. I don't like doing it myself, but you have to know. And if it's not right for you, you have to either pay to get a bigger policy or find a different company that has different policy limits and exclusions. If you operate a business out of your home, this is very important and a lot of people don't understand this. Let's say you run a daycare center out of your house. You have to make sure you're covered under that homeowner's policy. I think it's pretty rare for a homeowner's policy to cover business use unless you purchase an additional rider. And you may need to get a separate business or commercial insurance policy. There have been very sad cases like this. I remember years ago there was a case where a woman was running a daycare out of her home. There was a horrible tragedy and a child was playing outside and there were cars coming by and another parent came to pick up their kid and accidentally ran over this child, injuring or killing him. And the insurance company said to the woman who owned the daycare that all she had was a standard homeowner's policy, which had a very clear exclusion for business use. So she had no coverage when she was ultimately sued by the family of the little boy who was killed. So you have to make sure if you do anything that could be considered business related, and I said earlier, delivering a pizza or driving an Uber or a Lyft, you want to make sure that you have that. The second thing you should consider doing is forming a trust to hold your assets. A trust is a legal entity that holds assets for the benefit of its beneficiaries. I know that's a mouthful. I'm going to go over exactly what that means. So it's managed by a trustee who has all the legal obligations and control over the trust's funds and property and must govern it according to the terms of the trust and for the benefit of the beneficiaries. There are several types of trusts that can be used to protect your assets from creditors. An asset protection trust in some states, a qualified personal residence trust, a life insurance trust, and many other examples. Generally, to protect your assets from a judgment, the trust must be irrevocable, meaning it cannot be revoked. So it's for life. What this means is that you can't cancel it or have any control of the assets, but you can appoint someone you trust, aka trustee, to manage the assets for you. Typically, for a trust to shield your assets, someone other than you needs to be the trustee. And that person has to have the discretion to make any and all disbursements. So when you're creating this trust, and again, you want to talk to a lawyer about this, You should specify the terms of the trust, the parameters in the trust document, and the trustee then governs the trust according to your will. Forming a trust can be complicated. There's a lot you need to consider, so again, strongly consider you hire an attorney licensed in your state to draft one for you. Number 3, you can form a corporation or a limited liability company to protect your personal assets from business creditors. This is especially true if you have a business, you want to keep things separate. Whether you own your business as a sole proprietor or you're in a general partnership with someone else, you may be exposed to unlimited personal liability for the business's debts. Let's say you're in a general partnership. You could be liable for the poor business decisions of your partners. Likewise, you may even be liable for fraud and criminal acts committed by your partners. For those reasons, a general partnership can be very risky and exposes you to a great deal of personal liability. To protect yourself from personal liability, you want to consider forming a corporation, a limited liability company, or even a limited partnership to protect your assets and keep things separately. Before you do anything, research your state's laws and consider hiring an attorney to consult with you on that matter. Number 4, contribute to your retirement accounts. This is something that most of us don't do. It never seems like there's enough money in the bank to start saving for retirement. But let me give you another reason why you want to start putting money in a retirement account. Retirement accounts like 401k, 403b, IRAs have certain protections that prevent creditors from reaching them. This is especially true for plans that are governed by the Employee Retirement Income Security Act, also known as ERISA, which covers an overwhelming majority of employer-administered plans. So you want to make sure, but most likely, if you're getting your retirement account through your employer, it would be governed by ERISA. But again, talk to an attorney, do your research. Qualified plans covered by ERISA enjoy an unlimited protection from creditors, except for the IRS and child support. If you owe back taxes to the IRS or child support, they can still seize those. That's how much power the state has to go after those assets, that they can even go into your retirement account. Non-ERISA IRAs have a protection cap of $1 million, which could be changed in the future. It's adjusted for inflation, it also applies in bankruptcy proceedings. So it's very valuable. You want to consider putting money in your retirement account as a way of keeping it from creditors. Number 5, you want to take advantage of real estate protection laws. Homestead exceptions can be a very valuable tool, and they exist in pretty much every state, if not all states. They protect the equity in your principal residence, so it doesn't apply to investment properties, just your principal residence, from seizure by creditors. Homestead exemptions differ from state to state, and each has its own number or percentage of funds that would be protected as far as the equity in your home. A small number of states have an unlimited homestead exemption, meaning that if your house is worth $1 million and you have $1 million in equity, good for you. You live in a state that has an unlimited homestead protection. Other states may be as little as $50,000 or $150,000, so it really depends. But in any case, you'd be able to protect at least some money that you've put into your principal residence from being seized by creditors. It might make sense to you, depending on the state you live in, to pay additional principal on your mortgage every month rather than keeping it in your bank account. For example, let's say you put $50,000 in your home for the down payment. You've also paid, say, a few mortgage payments, but your total so far that's gone into the house is about $60,000. Your state has a $100,000 homestead exemption. So in that sense, you have another $40,000 that you could put in your house to reach that $100,000 in the event that you're later sued. So homestead exemptions are another thing that can really help as far as putting assets away to where your creditors can't seize them. Again, this all applies to things that you've done before a lawsuit is filed or threatened. After that, things change. Lastly, check to see how your house is titled. The easiest way to do this is to look at your deed, and if you don't have it, you could pull it up. It should be a public record. Some states allow for married couples to take property as tenants by the entirety. Under this ownership structure, each spouse has an indivisible share of the property. This means that both of you must consent to any sale or conveyance. In practical application, if a creditor obtains a judgment against you, he won't be able to force you to sell your house without your spouse's permission. So that's really the benefit of a tenants by the entirety form of ownership structure. However, if both you and your spouse are sued and a judgment is obtained against both of you, that protection wouldn't be too useful. In conclusion, protecting your assets may require some investment and planning, but it's achievable. You may need to spend some money on hiring an attorney to consult with you about it, an accountant maybe that's versed in this type of stuff, or to obtain additional insurance coverages that'll cover you in case the worst case scenario happens. There's no magic trick to guarantee that you'll have protection in case someone tries to seize your assets. As with everything in life, it's impossible to anticipate every possible scenario. Nevertheless, if you plan ahead and do your homework, you can put yourself in the best possible position to protect your assets from creditors in the event that you're later sued. Hope you enjoyed this episode. For more useful legal information and for tips on how to handle your lawsuit if you've chosen to represent yourself, for more guidance on that and some interesting legal topics and legal history issues, check out thelegalseagull.com, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Until next time, stay legal.